Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/ProRevenge. In today's episode, guy takes advantage of my little sister's disability, and I snap. After that, French students harass and bully me for asking them to speak English in an English taught class, so I get them expelled. Finally, a co-worker was eating people's lunches, so I poisoned them and got them fired. Before we get into today's episode, remember to subscribe so you never miss another episode of r/ProRevenge. Guy takes advantage of my little sister's disability, and I snap. A quick preface. This all happened about a year back. I will not be using real names, because I could be in deep it if I did. All actors in this story will have their names replaced with JoJo references. This is a long one. Context. My little sister, henceforth known as Holly, is mute. She can actually whisper a little, but it takes a lot of effort on her part. She's been mute ever since she was 5, when she lost her ability to speak in an accident. She's very smart, and she's a good-looking kid. At the time of these events, she was 16, and I was 21. Me and my sister lived together in an apartment, because my mother is a Roma who isn't well suited to take care of a teenager. She has our twin kid siblings, but not my sister and I. My dad is distant from the family, so helping my sister through high school falls to me. I work at a car parts shipping company, so I get paid just enough to get by. Because of our relatively poor living situation and my sister's inability to speak, she gets bullied at school. Generally it isn't much of a problem, but in the few months leading up to these events she was having increased problems with it. Build up. At the time, Holly was 16, but she was a sophomore in high school due to failing a year in middle school. She refuses to take special ed courses now because they didn't help her at all, because she's good looking and is older than most of her class. She gets attention from juniors and seniors. It's mostly negative attention, but there was one guy, who I will refer to as Dio from now on. He's the villain of the story, who treats her really nicely. He's a senior and at this time is 18. He repels bullies from her because he's a tall, handsome, tough guy, and bullies don't want to mess with him. I don't interfere with them because my sister is visibly happy when she comes home from school and whenever she's around him. I didn't let them hang out alone together, but supervised them hanging out a few times. Anyway, King Crimson a few months, and she stops coming home happy. She isn't hanging out with him anymore either. And although I ask her multiple times, she won't tell me anything about it. I confront him about it, and he evades the topic. At this point I'm suspicious, but I don't know what to be suspicious of. Researching. I'm getting more and more worried about Holly, so I go to her counselor and assistant principal to ask about her activities at school. From what I learn, she still spends all her free time near Dio at school. I find this strange, since she doesn't seem happy anymore. This is where the illegal stuff starts. A few days later, I invite Holly and Dio on a dinner night to Olive Garden. No one can resist Olive Garden. While we're there I do two things that are completely illegal. 1. I steal his phone, which I've seen the password to, and 2. I read his texts and emails. Anything I can to find out what's happened between them. I don't find what I'm looking for, but I do find out that he drinks and smokes weed with his friends on weekends. This will be relevant later. A few days later I find his phone in the laundry, and say it must have ended up in one of our coats on accident. I know for a fact he got it back, because he called me to thank me for having Holly return it. I still didn't have what I was looking for, so I went back to the school and used his previous texts as grounds to check CCTV for any suspicious activity. There wasn't anything suspicious by school standards, but there was something that caught my eye. It was my sister going to the central bathroom in the school, and him going to the boys' room of the same bathroom about a minute later. The bathrooms are separated by a wall, but there's a janitorial closet that opens into both bathrooms and is completely in the blind zone of anyone walking into the bathrooms, let alone the CCTV cameras. At this point, I began to suspect that something was happening between them in that bathroom. It was the only one with a closet like that, and if my memory served me, the closet didn't have a proper lock. It just locked from the outside on both sides. Boiling point. Now that I suspected something, I confronted Holly about it. She broke down crying, and after 15 minutes of consoling, she shakily signed to me something that made my blood boil. Apparently, it was far worse than I expected. I had thought they were going in there and doing drugs or something, since Dia was the kind of guy who would pull that kind of thing. As it turns out, according to Holly, he brought her in there one day, closed the doors, held her down, and raped her. He told her that he would know if she told anyone, and he would hurt her if she did. Because she physically could not scream for help, or make any kind of loud noise for that matter, he got away with it. And the worst part is, he was threatening her into meeting him there every couple of days and doing that to her. I was livid. My first instinct was to call the police, but I realized that there was no evidence except the testimony of a mute girl. I wouldn't be satisfied with police intervention anyway. The first thing I did was call Holly in for a week from school. Family emergency can get them a week of excused absences easily. The next thing I did was find out where he lived. After that, I planned the most brutal revenge I could think of. Highly illegal revenge. My first step was to break into his house. It turns out his parents go out a lot, and he leaves to smoke and drink with his friends. I knew from reading his texts that there was a spare key on top of the porch light in the backyard. That Saturday, I scoped out the place and waited for everyone to leave. I then began phase 1 of my revenge. I went into his house through the back door and found his room. I smashed his PC, stole his wallet, and pissed on his bed. Then I poolly hid 2 small bags of weed in his house. I have a friend who grows. Finally, to hide the fact that it was targeted, I tossed up the rest of the house, but didn't take anything. I then went to a Starbucks and used the Wi-Fi in Dio's debit card, he didn't have credit, to purchase a bunch of X toys in his name and send them to his house. I then left his wallet sitting near homeless man sleeping on a park bench. Next, I contacted his parents and told them I had seen their son drinking and smoking with a group of teenagers. They were furious, which leads me to believe that wasn't the first time something like that had happened. Finally, I went to the back road he walked on his way home from his drinking parties, which I had found out in a text from one of his friends. I waited for 2 hours in some bushes for him to walk by, and then, wearing sunglasses and a hoodie, jumped him. I demanded his money and phone, although I knew he didn't have his wallet. I kept one hand in my hoodie pocket, pointing it like I had a gun, which he believed. He handed over his phone and ran away. I then finished up my plan by using his phone, which I still had the password to send an email to the school from his school email, confessing to raping my sister in the janitorial closet multiple times, as well as possessing drugs on school grounds and drinking alcohol when he was underage. Then I snapped his phone on my knee and went home. Aftermath. My sister went back to school the following Monday, armed with a can of mace I bought her. Dio wasn't at school, and she was called in by her counselor. She confessed, and he was charged with rape, underage drinking, and illegal drug possession. On top of that, his parents completely disowned him, and he was expelled from the school. Sadly, this story doesn't have a completely happy end. This whole ordeal sent Holly into a downward spiral. Her grades fell behind, and she barely smiled. In March of 2018, she attempted suicide by cutting herself, and it was pure luck that I found her in time. She's getting better now, but the emotional trauma will probably affect her for life. I pray to whatever cruel gods are out there that he gets a taste of his own medicine in prison. French students harass and bully me for asking them to speak English in an English taught class, so I get them expelled. Hi all. Throwaway for obvious reasons. This happened a few years back in China, at one of the universities there. Here, I was studying Chinese language and I shared my language class with some people from France and Belgium, the French speaking part. Our Chinese teacher was a really nice little lady that happened to also speak French. So often, whenever the French speakers had a question, they would ask it in French. Now, I didn't really mind it all that much, but at some point, it got to the point where about half of the questions in the class were asked in a language I did not understand. Obviously that is detrimental to my own learning experience since understanding the questions is important for me to learn the language. So I politely asked them if we could just do the class in English, because about half of us didn't understand what was being asked. Laoshi, the teacher, was very nice about it and afterwards asked the students if they could rephrase their question in English when they asked it in French. But apparently the French and Belgian girls and guys didn't take it so well. They were constantly glaring at me and whispering among themselves in French. Well, I just shrugged and moved on. However, outside of class they were always sticking together in their own little group, doing things together. At first they would just walk past me when I was sitting down having a beer with my friends, and they would simply glare. But at some point it came down to them cursing, talking it about me to other students and spitting on my lap when I was sitting in the park. Obviously I was seething, so I might have called them a few words which were a bit too unsavory. Anyhow, they didn't take it well. So the next day, I found out that they scribbled all sorts of things on my dorm room. It said basically, "Frick your mother," and "Nazi." I don't actually know why they put this one. I think they thought I was German, which I'm not. Obviously I was pissed, but I didn't really know what to do, so I reported it to the International Student Office. ISO was really nice and understanding, but told me they can't actually do much unless I provide proof that something is happening. Thus, I went on Taobao and bought a little recording camera, looked a bit like a dashcam. It had the time and date and everything. After the university had painted my room door over, they couldn't get the markers off apparently. I hung the camera up in a corner of our dorm corridor and pointed it at my door. Then I left and made sure to loop around a little bit to walk past the group of French Belgians so that they knew I was leaving campus towards the metro station. I had some nice dumpling soup and a beer, and when I came back, look and behold, once again they were hardly creative with their insults, just more of the same, but this time I had proof. I checked the video and I was very pleased. 5 out of 7 of the group were actually there, and all wrote down something on the door with permanent marker. One of the guys even kicked the door, which caused a crack at the bottom. These doors were not very sturdy. They seemed to have a lot of fun doing it. Now, of course the school was properly pissed when I showed them the video. Normally the students would just get a stern warning, but because ISO was aware that they were doing it before, and also about the fact that they were harassing me all the time, I reported everything to them when it happened. They were less than understanding this time and suggested the board that had to decide on this. No idea what their name was. I couldn't recognize their name in Hanzi to expel the students. And so they were. All of this took place over the course of a couple of months, so we were nearing the end of the semester. The 5 students who scribbled at my door got expelled just before their exams, which meant that all the time they spent at the university was effectively worthless since they did not receive any credits for it. But it gets even better. After this whole ordeal, I sent a neat, anonymous letter in Chinese. One of my Chinese friends helped me write it to the Public Security Bureau that these students had engaged in vandalism at our university. A few weeks later, after I had already returned home, I was told by a friend of mine who was on good terms with their group that some of them had booked tickets and hostels to travel in China at the end of the semester. However, their visa extension was denied by the Public Security Bureau on the basis of their misdemeanor at the university. I'm not sure if the second part was caused because of my letter, or simply because the university informed the police, but I like to pretend that it was the former. So I was just laughing my ass off as they slaved away half a year in courses for which they would receive no credit, and had to cancel thousands worth of travel plans. That truly was a sweet feeling. A coworker was eating people's lunches, so I poisoned them and got them fired. So I like to bring my own food into the office, and we have a fridge to put things into, and I have my food in tubs with my name on them. A coworker would sometimes not see people's names on food and think it was theirs, so would heat it up and eat it and then apologize. They did this enough for it to be an annoyance, but not enough for our employers to really care. This has been happening with my food for once or twice a month. Last month I had enough, and I like spicy food, but don't bring it into the office as sometimes I'll let people try some of my food and my cooking. I ordered a bag of ghost chili peppers and put the full bag into a big pot of chili that would last for several days. I took this into the office and had it for lunch every day. Midweek my lunch went missing and I was waiting for the person who was stealing my lunch get a shock when they ate my lunch. What happened in reality was someone got sent home sick, and the next day they were off and I was told they went to the doctors for stomach pains. 2 weeks went by and the co-worker who was off refused to talk about it and said HR was involved, so I knew they were going to try get me fired. I went home and ordered another bag of ghost chilies and made another batch of my chili, this time with only one chili in a single tub. I put this in the freezer and the following Monday I was told I had a HR meeting that day. I refused and said they need to give me 24 hours to find someone to come into the meeting with me, and the next day I had my manager come into the meeting and brought in my now heated ghost chili infused chili. The long and short is I was told I could be fired for trying to poison the person who was stealing my lunch, and I asked if they admitted to stealing people's lunch, which they did. I then said I have a batch of the chili in question with me, and I like spicy food. My liking spicy food shouldn't stop me from having it at work since it doesn't smell when heated, like fish, and my manager agreed it was on the person who took my lunch without knowing how spicy it was, and I should not be held liable if they eat something of someone else's that doesn't agree with them. My manager and I then ate some of the chili and offered it to the other people in the meeting, some of which tried it and agreed while it was spicy it was clearly what I liked as I was fine eating it. The meeting ended and nothing happened. I wasn't taken into another meeting and my lunch wasn't taken anymore, but the person who had stole our lunch got a slap on the wrist and was allowed to stay at work. Lunches started to go missing again, so my manager went to HR to say that lunches were going missing and he knew who was taking it and had proof this time. And when they asked for the proof he presented the meeting record with the line highlighted where they admitted they had stolen lunch and the line where HR had said this was not what the meeting was about. They were fired the next day for theft of property and told they would not be given a reference.